Okay, we are live. I don't think there's anyone here yet. Hello. Hello, and welcome to the third Big Book Club live show. Today I am here with Kieran from KD Books, and we have read Possession by A.S. Byatt. If you are unaware of what the Big Book Club is, I'm not sure how you found your way here, but we read books over 500 pages. And one of this month's theme, well, the last 2 months, the theme was a Booker Prize winner. And Kieran is the Booker boy, so I invited him along to talk about this Booker Prize winning book. So, Kieran, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you tend to read and your favourite book over 500 pages.
Okay, my name's Kieran, I run a channel, KD Books, which I am known for my wonderfully hyperbolistic raving reviews about everything that I read. Everything's a 5-star. I've never hated a single book in my life. I predominantly read literary fiction, be that any genre, be that any aspect of literary. I'll cover it. I'm currently on a bit of a sci-fi bent at the moment. My favourite book over 500 pages is probably going to be, shock horror if anyone knows me, it's probably Midnight's Children by Sir Salman Rushdie.
Yeah, I've not read any Rushdie myself, actually.
You need to sort that out ASAP. ASAP.
He's got a new one out, doesn't he?
He has. Victory City. It wasn't that good.
Okay, and so the Possession, the book that we just read, is a book about 2 Victorian poets and 2 80s academics in the 1980s who have discovered something about these poets that was previously unknown, a connection between the poets, and they go on a sort of academic detective hunt to try and find out what the mystery is, what the story is between these poets that were previously unlinked, although they were writing at the same time. Would you say that's a fair summation?
That's a fair summation.
Okay, and Kieran, what did you think of it?
Hated it completely. For many reasons. So I'm currently doing my PhD. We thought about quitting before anyone's gone. Wait, I thought my lecturer was like, just write the damn thing. So we're trying to do that. I'm currently doing my PhD on romantic poetry and its legacies in contemporary Polish literature through Olga Tokarczuk. So in regards of how the past informs the future in relation to poetry solely, that is literally what I am writing about. So jumping into this and realizing this is pretty much my thesis wasn't entirely enthralling to me. I don't particularly like and have a penchant for hating the Victorian era. Like Victorian era Britain is a touching subject for me, of which this book is entrenched in, and it's I can't really fault Byatt for doing that because it's kind of integral to the entirety of the plot, and in regards to the setting, maybe we'll talk about that later. There, and then additionally, I read the introduction of our copies, saying that she basically got the impetus to write the book that she wanted to read via reading Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, which is one of the best books written in the 20th century. And going into Possession, knowing what I know about The Name of the Rose and studying The Name of the Rose, I equally think I went in with wrong expectations to what Possession was going to be and where it lines. Have you read The Name of the Rose?
I have not, no.
So as it kind of... Name of the Rose is a murder mystery set in the 1327, so the 14th century, in a monastery. So it's kind of set in history. Umberto Eco knew no one cared about medieval theology, but because it's like a really weird murder mystery, it gets you in.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, he can talk about all the aspects of medieval theology and going, isn't this quite interesting that they thought this? And this is how the different religions, XYZ, go about their days, and different interpretations, which is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Possession isn't a murder mystery.
No.
It's a romance at the end of the day, really. So I think knowing when we first start the story, Mitchell, this it's kind of like a lonely, aloof academic scholar who really cares about this one Victorian poet, Ash, finds a letter and then kind of pilfers it away so no one else can see it. I thought he was going to set up in a similar vein to Umberto Eco's Foucault's Pendulum, which kind of starts about like the Rosicrucians and a man like smuggles himself away in a museum. Right. I thought we were going down that road, and it doesn't go down that road. So I suppose I kind of set myself up for failure by thinking, oh, she's told me Umberto Eco. I have Umberto Eco in my head. I know his wheelhouse. I know all his novels. And therefore, I kind of got something that I wasn't expecting, but nevertheless, Byatt isn't. I think she kind of over eggs the mystery. Is it a mystery or the suspense 100%. And the tension? I think she kind of over eggs that to the point where I was kind of waning in my. I don't read romance, so it's not something that I'm drawn to, and it's not something that immediately would enthrall me. So I suppose Byatt had a really difficult time trying to win me over because of all the setbacks that I equally have going into a novel such as this. But it is called Possession: a romance. So again, maybe more for me.
We did talk about the idea of it being a romance in the Discord channel, about like what kind of, how do you consider it a romance? Because obviously there are two romantic relationships that are at the center of the novel, but then also the epitaph at the beginning says the point of view in which this tale comes under the romantic definition lies in an attempt to connect a bygone time with the very present that is flitting away from us. So like that, the whole thing you were talking about, your whole PhD about the connection of the past with the present is also part of the way that it's considered a romance, I guess, in the same way like the possession of the title means two things. All of the characters are like double. There's a lot of doubling in the book, a lot of repetition, which I guess it's intentional, but I did find the pacing of this book really weird, and I think that was also intentional. It was like you get into the mystery bit and then she like stops you with a poem, or she stops you with going in a completely different direction, and I think it's supposed to like heighten your tension of going somewhere, like being like, oh, I have to get through this. But for me it was just like, I've lost it now. I'm no longer like, I was beginning to build an interest in this subject, and now I have to read a chapter long Victorian poem, and I feel like it's potentially, I mean, we're talking about, I'm going all over the place, but the poems in it, I think it's, if you were studying this and your intention was to look through the poems as you would analyze a poem and to see the like clues that she's woven into it and all that, then maybe it would be more interesting. Whereas from just a straightforwardly reading a novel perspective, apart from the blatantly obvious clues, I was not really, I don't like Victorian poetry anyway, so I'm already like not in the right mindset. I didn't realize how much of this would be just like fairy tale poems. Yeah, just weird French fairy tales. So but I thought that if I'd been studying it at school, my friend did it for her A levels, and was showing me all of her notes and stuff, and I feel like then maybe you would get in, it's like almost like the Da Vinci Code, like in that, like trying to work out the clues to find out what's going on. But I didn't feel like my brain was in that mindset.
You know, it's a good book when you start comparing to the Da Vinci Code. that is a good selling point to most people. I would argue.
The Da Vinci Code is a very well-selling book.
It's true. That is true.
And you can read it in a day, which I think would have been harder with Possession. Yeah. I just found myself sort of frustrated with the book more than anything, because Byatt can clearly write well, like the actual construction, the way she like when she is spending time with one specific character and like exploring them, I found that was done well. All of her characters felt very realistic to me. But and the like the ways they connected, particularly Maud and Roland, when they were talking about like being an academic and being feeling uncomfortable in their position and like not very secure in their own identities and things like that. I thought they felt like very honest conversations, and the turn of phrase and everything was lovely. But in terms of the plot, I just kept being like, I'm gonna have to listen to this on an audiobook on 2x speed, because I can't put myself through this poem.
Okay.
I can't do it. Tweeger has asked, curious if you guys, especially with a PhD in poetry, found Byatt's poetry convincing as famous Victorian poetry.
I knew that the poets weren't real going in.
Yeah.
So do I think she does a good job in conceptualizing what a Victorian poet would write like from the very limited amount that I've read? Yes. But I suppose it's kind of it's a difficult. I can't really say was it convincing in the fact that it's a very good pastiche. You could tell that she's kind of enamored with this era. I'm not entirely sure. I know Byatt was in academia. I don't know if Victorian literature or the Victorian era was in her wheelhouse. I'm not entirely sure if this is just more like a passion project for her. But I think it's unfair for me to be like, was I convinced? Because I know people have gone into this and then kind of been like, oh no, like Graham Bouquet Burnett, being like, wait, none of this existed.
I thought it was.
Yeah. So for me, I understand it's a good pastiche, but it didn't convince me because I already knew that Ash and Lamotte didn't exist in any way, shape, or form.
Well, even the names are from Victorian poetry. Like Lamotte is in. Oh God, who is it?
I imagine Christina Rossetti.
It's either Rossetti or Browning. I think most of the poems are kind of pastiches of Rossetti.
I think Ash is Browning. Lamotte is Rossetti.
Yeah.
I think she's kind of taken from those two. I kind of knew that going in, but I've not read any Rossetti and I've not read any Browning. So again, I just know this information, but I've not. Yeah.
Believable is a better word. I think for me, part of the way that it fell down in terms of believability is that she's not a poet and she's writing all of these poems as two different people, and they don't really read as two different people's poems. They read as very similar. I feel like there's maybe the themes or whatever they're discussing, but I feel like a lot of maybe that's the point as well. You're supposed to see where they intersect because they're like writing the poems for one another as their imagined audience and all that sort of thing. But I felt like, but then maybe it's just the meter and the sort of standard form of Victorian poetry being more similar to one another. Like I'm not hugely able to tell the difference between a lot of Victorian poets. I don't know. I only really know Tennyson particularly well. Others I don't know that well. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't not find them believable, but I don't think I would have. It's hard to know when you go in, like you were saying, it's hard to know when you go in knowing that they're not real, whether you would have been convinced if you hadn't known that. You can't not know what you knew.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to tell. I did send you the structure of the book. I was thinking was interesting because in the beginning, so Roland, our main character, our modern day Ash, he is working on a like a question for his an academic question, and he comes across Ash's book, his translation, and he finds it's stuffed full of all these like notes and different leaves of different bits of paper. And I thought that was interesting in the way that like the book is structured, in that it is like a lot of different bits of paper like shoved together, like bits of this book, bits of this diary, bits of these letters, bits of these poems. Like there's I think it sets us off at the beginning with, this is how the book is going to be shaped. It's going to be shaped like that book.
Okay. I didn't think that. I didn't think that. I didn't see that. Yeah. But I like that. I like that.
And so you've already said at the beginning that you didn't necessarily enjoy having to read through stuff that's similar to what you're reading through for your PhD.
Yeah, it's very... how would I describe Byatt? It's very self-aware in regards to its construction, in regards to this is, you know, these are poets, these are scholars. She's playing into that way of writing that is very not heightened, but
it's very specific.
There's like a sterility to it. I always find like reading academic papers or even any journals, there is a sterility in it that is meant to be. I don't really know what about academic writing. It is like it's a very distinct flavor. I've never really known what it is. It's at some hand very like it kind of wills you to be like, you need to follow me, while also pushing you at a distance, going and now as the reader you will understand XYZ.
And it's also like the writer is not a person. Like they're not bringing themselves as a person to their writing. If that makes sense. Like their opinions have to be stated as if like, this is what we can see from this, rather than, I think it's like, it's very detached from their own feeling, their own experience, the way that they as a person affect the way they're writing is kind of left out of writing like that. They're detached.
So, yeah, so I think Byatt is doing that, and therefore the elements that kind of break the structure of that and almost break the form is through the introduction of the Victorians, be that then from their viewpoint, which becomes less like clerical, and then she moves into that descriptive, evocative, and emotional aspect, be that via the prose, be that through letters, marginalia, and poetry. That it's the Victorians that break up the tension of the book, and that it's the kind of, we're following the modern tension, but now as we go back to the origins, there is no tension because they don't understand what they are purportedly meant to be portraying to the reader. That's a really long-winded way of explaining that. So I hope it makes sense.
The sentence,
so, sorry. In regards that the modern day is filled with tension. The Victorian isn't, because the Victorians are not aware of what the contemporary knows.
Yes.
And therefore, what the reader has a very unique spot, my personal opinion, that we have an almost offset dramatic irony unfolding in front of us.
Yeah.
And therefore, you need the Victorian, which is why I think is it like when does it start coming in? It's more like the second half. You kind of switch into Victorian. You almost kind of forget. You have to be aware of what the contemporary have said in order to inform what Lamotte and Ash are currently depicting.
Yeah.
I know I've kind of jumped from two different angles of your questions and kind of reverted back to each other.
Yeah.
But I think that is something that offset nature and the way the read. Oh God, I'm going into postmodernism. We're just.
Well, I was just going to say, because they talk about postmodernism in the book. Maud and Roland, they talk about postmodern detachment and irony and how they can't like connect in the same way, and the thing that they are enjoying experiencing from reading the letters is this sort of unironic like openness to romance and love and emotions that isn't keeping itself at a remove from anything. It's like embodied experience rather than that kind of watching yourself do the thing, if that makes sense.
Right. They relate to they're relating to the original authors what they wish to experience.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. But then you also have the irony that isn't what's happening.
Yeah.
It's about, I think for when this was written, I was thinking about this when I finished it. There's a lot of books that I could compare this to. I don't think I would compare it to The Name of the Rose. I can see it being an impetus and it makes sense. But what I want to compare it to comes after this book. And therefore, this does feel like a very... I'm just trying to say like the 1990s isn't modern, but this feels very contemporary, and there would be a lot of people, if you were to provide them this, I think they would say this is more 20th century than late 20th. 21st century than late 20th. I do apologize.
Yeah.
And therefore, I have to give props to Byatt for that, because I'm unsure if this book, because it was similar to The Name of Rose, a little bit of an unusual bestseller, to how much this has informed. I talk about legacies and I'm going into my PhD, so do forgive me. But how much has this informed a lot of the contemporary way in which this type of work is being constructed, of the past informing the present informing the future.
Yeah.
But you have Possession's almost annoying ending.
Yes.
Is it annoying? Is it annoying? I don't know. I kind of love it. Because it kind of goes, because it's literally like the antithesis. It's not the antithesis. It is the thesis of what the entire book has been about. So I think I enjoy it. I just don't understand where on earth that plot point occurs. And am I meant to just believe that happened? And there probably would be no historical textual record in and of there, but it feels very, and this happened, but none of you would have known this.
Yeah.
And I kind of love the audacity of that to say, like, none of you were privy to this information. And maybe that's important. Maybe that is important of what we feel as though we can obtain. And then you have the different ways. You can see why my reviews take hours to edit. But how you have the various different types of perceptions and possessions of textual analysis, record, document, and how that is obtained. And therefore, all of it's almost moot without knowing a vital piece of information that none of the text is ever provided to the public.
Yeah.
That Ash keeps that information to himself. He doesn't write about it. He doesn't document it. And therefore, the entire thesis of what they're doing is almost enacted in that. I'm a little bit annoyed that you can't see it being set up in front of you. For anyone who doesn't know, the end kind of just happens in a moment of Ash's life.
About 10 years, I guess, after the main romantic part of the story over.
Yeah.
By the age of the, yeah.
But there's no, unless I've missed it, I'm happy to sequester myself to, I just missed it. But it does just seem to like this happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I did find it. I found it a bit almost like twee. Like it was just a bit too pat and a bit too like. I understood from what you're saying that the point of like there being an element, the book's about like what's private and what's public and what you can know about someone in the future, like when you've only got the things that they were willing to make public, you don't know really what was private. And so I get it from that point of view, but it did just feel a little like a nice Sunday afternoon film ending. I don't know, it just felt too nice for me, which is I think that's just my I preferred. I don't think it had enough. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was mainly just the bit where they were like, "Oh, she forgot. Like, she didn't say anything. She forgot, and nothing was ever said." And I guess that is realistic, but it just felt. I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of it. It just felt. Yeah, I don't know how to describe what I mean. I think it was just an emotional response to that, but I didn't. And the thing is that I'd had a similar response to. So in the middle of the novel, when things start to get more and more Victorian, we suddenly have a chapter from the perspective of Ash and Christabel. We have that, and all of the rest of it has been either from the perspective of the academics, various different academics, or written words that they have recorded. And then all of a sudden we had this perspective chapter. And I was unsure what the point of that was. Like, why did we have this chapter actually from their perspective, the actual experience of what they actually did? When there's only 2 chapters in this that are actually set in the Victorian period.
Yeah.
The ending and the middle. And I guess it was a nice, like, it was an entry point into it becoming more Victorian. But everything, I guess, again, it's also the like privacy, the things we couldn't know about what actually went on between them, the words they said and the things that they felt. I don't know, but it just felt strange to me that it was so little of the novel. It felt like either do that more or it's unnecessary. To me, it felt unnecessary, I think.
I think it's really interesting you say, because I'd say quite a lot of this is set in the Victoria, because I'm taking the poets as from their writings being set in the Victorian, which I think is quite interesting in regards to that time and what you view as the period. The perspective shift. I'm unsure what I think about the perspective shift. I didn't. I suppose. I'd have to think about that one. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head.
I think because yes, the poems and the letters and the diaries they are set in the Victorian period, but they are only what our modern characters have access to.
Yes.
There's nothing there that doesn't still exist in the modern period. So even though it is written in the Victorian time, it still exists in the modern period.
Yeah.
So it's present for them. Even though it's written in the past, it's still part of their present as well. They're discovering it in the present.
Yeah.
Whereas these 2 chapters, the middle one and the end one, are undiscovered. They are the private aspect of Ash and Lamont. They're the only bits that are fully in the Victorian period because they are inaccessible to our modern characters.
Kind of going back to in regards to the existence, something that I'm kind of grappling with is there is the question, again, we talk about possession, and that's the very key word in all of this, but it's kind of, for the scholars, the texts belong to the present and they should be important to the present, whereas we don't really talk about texts from the past as being, they're not almost owned by the past. They're kind of owned by what we decide is worthy to be read. I suppose a lot of scholarship is kind of, I understand, like, you have Ash and Lamont just to kind of keep it grounded into the book. These are Victorian poets. No one knows. They kind of they belong to the past, but they should be owned by the present for study of what it is that we want the text to achieve, which is what this kind of the journey is mostly of what do Mitchell and Bailey want from the text. It's not the other way round.
Yeah.
And can
Which
you
I
have
think
the other way round?
Yeah. Which I think is especially shown in the character of Leonora and she's the American the American academic who's been obsessed with Lamont and sees her as a lesbian feminist poet.
Yeah.
And so this whole revelation of the Ash situation is very different. Like it's very changing her perspective of it. But her academic chapter was the one where I was like, I have to read these sentences like 3 times because I'm not really sure. It was so deep into that like academic language that it was like I know that it was a pastiche. It was kind of a parody of a feminist scholar, like using all of the. I was trying to find there was a particular sentence where I was like, this sentence just it has like 12 subordinate clauses and it's just going all over the like with yeah. It was like, where do these things link up? It reminded me of like translating Latin poetry, where you're like, wait, where's the verb? How can I find the verb? Yeah, it was just but this is a completely different trajectory. But I was thinking about it as a comedy as well. It has that kind of comedy of manners element where when you go into a specific world, and I think that is in some parts this novel is also written like a Victorian novel. There's like a meta part of it where it is written in the style of a Victorian novel, when like for example when the narrator starts talking to us, she just starts talking to us about like the ideas of privacy or the ideas of the personal life or the ways that one would react in Roland's situation, in the way that like in Middlemarch the narrator just starts talking to us for no reason or they'll start to have, or Tolstoy does it as well, they'll start to talk about the ideas and themes of the novel to you. And I think that started to happen towards the end in Byatt.
Not something I ever would have picked up, but I see fourth wall breaking being a very postmodern invention. I probably wouldn't. Again, my wheelhouse of my love is not in the Victorians, so I'm not going to even entertain the fact that I would be able to identify that. But I would 100% put down money on that would be like a categoric, very postmodern idea of what narration should do. Like if I see that, I kind of go, I know this is postmodern. I suppose maybe because I've read Middlemarch.
Yeah.
And I can't remember that. Like bailed on Tolstoy. So maybe
Forster does it as well. I mean, he's Edwardian rather than Victorian, but when you read Howard's End, he's just like, and you know, this sort of the ideas of class in this time period. He's just like talking to you, but he doesn't say like I. So it's not like it's a kind of a direct address. He's writing a direct address, and Dickens does it. I find it's really common in a Victorian novel to have this random moments of direct address. Even like Pride and Prejudice, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a large fortune, like she's talking to you a lot of the time in it. It's like a wink to the reader. She does it a lot in other parts as well. There's a kind of, or Reader, I Married Him from Jane Eyre.
Yeah.
There's I find it to be incredibly common throughout Victorian literature that they just start talking to you.
Every day's a school day, people. Every day's a school day. No, I wouldn't even gone down that route. Very interesting stuff, though.
Well, and also interesting if the themes are we've got the postmodern people and the Victorian people, and she's marrying the narrative style of that is common to both. I think it's a clever book. I just don't think I enjoyed it very much. I think it's my main.
It asks a lot of questions. It asks a lot of. I think if you're going into this for a jolly, or like, I just want to see, do these people end up together? Is it a happy ever after sort of story? You're not going to get that.
No.
I suppose this is where the difference is between how I see what Byatt does and what Umberto Eco does. Is Eco, he sets you up on, okay, this is the element that this is the element that you need to think about, and he does kind of push that all the way to the end, so you don't get any answers until the end, but all the way through it you've been gearing up and getting those clues. I think Byatt doesn't do that, but equally the story doesn't, it's not trying to serve that purpose. And then you have the scenes such as where they're exhuming the body that feels to me very like, oh, like, we don't have to do this, Byatt. We don't.
Yeah.
I understand that's kind of this, in regards to academia and wanting to know more about people. I would imagine those things are being done. I don't think Byatt just kind of like plucked out the, I don't know, exhuming bodies. Maybe for history, you would do such a thing, such as when Richard Ford was found in a car park. You'd have people all over there. I suppose, yes, it does exist. Maybe not in an English department as such, but there's an element of you don't need any of that because Mitchell and Bailey, of the two that we're focused on, are only there upon the textual analysis. Which is it's a very formalist way. It's not really a postmodern way of doing things, but I think that's the problem of this story is I know why Byatt's doing it, and I get the motions that she goes down. I don't know if it's the most effective, and I think Umberto Eco is very effective of knowing his theoretical side, and he knows his historical side. But Umberto Eco's, he is hilarious because he also knows a lot of the lowbrow stuff. He knows like all the low-hanging fruit, and he goes, "We're going down a murder mystery," and I know he knows so much of like the tropes and the cliches that he can riff off them and go, I know you're going to think this is a red herring, and guess what? By the end, it ain't going to be the red herring that you thought it was going to be. It's like, it's really glaringly obvious. And how he... is it unfair? No, because Byatt kind of attributes Eco, so I'm allowed to do this. But I think that's the element of this book. Do I care enough about two historical people and two contemporary people who want to fall in love and they kind of like repressed, like, please hold me dearly? Is that enough to captivate me through a story? No. But Byatt also said that she agreed with D.H. Lawrence in regard that you have to have two couples to start a story.
Right.
You have to do that. And I really like D.H. Lawrence.
I've not read any Lawrence.
And I don't think Byatt... I'm unsure if the story is about the romance or if it's Byatt trying to get across her theories and ideas of what the word possession means and all the kind of semantic entanglements of that. Is she more focused on wanting to explore that and explore the downfalls and the peaks and troughs of interpretation and the implications interpretation can have? But the only way she could have done that is gone, I'll write a love story that will captivate people. I'm not sure. But I did, when I was reading this in the coffee shop, I'd never spoken to this lady before. She came over, she went, you got to read Byatt's other works. She was like, is this your first? And I was like, yes. She went, yeah, it's like very different to her other stuff. Which I suppose is good, because I was a little bit put off by jumping into Byatt. When you have some authors that are like, I'm going to have to think my way through this.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, like, clear, like, I'm glad that we did this, because I don't think I would have read this otherwise. But then this is, a darling of dark academia. And as I am the dark academia of BookTube, maybe I should. Yeah. It's a very difficult book to talk about. I will say there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. I thought that in terms of the exclamation scene, which we were talking about, to go back to that, there were two things that I thought about in terms of, there's like the acquisitiveness, the possession aspect of it, that I think it's both a comedy in that scene. I think that scene has very much a like comedy of manners feeling to it, where they all turn up and then they're like, oh dear, like, well, we'll have to go back, and they go back and they get given like a drink, and the candles are on, and they eat heating things up in the Arga. It's very Agatha Christie almost in that moment.
Love that I'm talking to you because I have no idea what comedy of manners is, and I'm so like I have no concept of all of this, but I'm loving it. Just in case I'm like I sorry about this. You're coming at like the wrong angle with me, but I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Just in case you think like he's looking blank, it's just because I'm trying to root this in something. And they said I've never read Agatha Christie before, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this. I'm learning. So
it's like,
take it away.
It's just that very sort of dry humor of people being ridiculous, but everyone acting as if it's very normal for that to. That's just the way that society is. You know, when you're like, it's like an extreme version of it. It's like A Room with a View. I don't. That's what that.
I got to the bit with the umbrella and binned it. Is it like The Idiot with Lord Mishkin and the money scene?
I'm not read
Dostoevsky. Darn it.
We're just not, yeah. But yeah, and then also the other thing that it does remind me of though is, you know, like when you're watching, if you watch a like British police procedural and they have to go and dig up a body and everyone's there with their umbrellas looking very serious and everything's quite blue, and it has that. Because she was clearly trying to write, she talked in the introduction about wanting to write a detective novel and wanting it to be a detective story. And I think she's in that moment where they're catching the man in the act of doing the bad thing, kind of Famous Five style, but they're also like very serious around a grave, and it's pouring with rain because it's always raining when you exhume a body.
Yes. Fossil Red Famous Five. Is it like 4 deaths at a funeral, like 4 weddings at a funeral? Is that the thing?
Yeah, 4 weddings and a funeral.
Yeah,
at that funeral.
Is it like that?
I don't think so.
Am I even thinking of the right film? It's got Peter Dinklage in it.
Peter Dinklage?
No. He ends up. There's a coffin. Was it that 4 weddings and a funeral? No.
Shallow Grave?
No. What film?
4 Weddings and a Funeral is Hugh Grant and Andy McDowell.
I don't know who Andy McDowell is. Have you read Wolf Hall?
Yes.
Is it like when Henry VIII turns up to court? I'm talking about the last book here, and everyone's kind of like, I don't know what's going on, but he's acting like an angel, but like we're just going to nod because he's going to kill us.
Just going to go with it.
Marvelous. Okay, this is what happens, people. I'm not even going to nod and pretend I know all these references because I have no clue. But yes,
I feel like our like frame of reference is very different.
Very different. Yes,
coming from a very different perspective.
I don't think anything is like. Oh, like Iris right? The sea, Iris Murdoch. When everyone kind of like turns up at the sea, and they're like, okay. Yeah, I'll research comedy of manners.
Comedy of manners. I mean, it's Austen. It's Jane Austen. Have you at least read Austen?
I've never finished an Austen novel.
Okay.
I was forefront. I don't particularly like this era. You got the romantics, and then you got the modernists, and everything in between I can pretty much give up, apart from Jane Eyre. That book's incredible.
Okay.
There you go.
I've never read a modernist.
You must have read one modernist. Did you do Auden a modernist? Yeah, Auden. Forstner's a modernist.
I hated Auden so much that I studied a different poet by myself for my A-levels.
Yeah, E.M. Forstner's a modernist.
Oh, is he? He's like early.
Yeah, early modernist. Virginia Woolf's a modernist, part of the Bloomsbury group. You've ever read the book? Rooms of One Own. Counts.
haven't read
It
it.
count. Take it. Oh, right. Okay. Right.
I just know about it.
Just know about it. Do you
It's
not
one of
read
those
any
things
more
that's like in the email.
Gosh.
I don't think so, apart from Morden married me.
Well, yeah. Okay. Oh, right. We've both come together.
We've learned.
We've learned, and that's really what the book's all about. If
Yeah.
that's what reading's about, people. We've learned
Yeah.
something. I've read a single mod in it. Not even T.S. Eliot.
No, never read any Eliot.
Ezra Pound.
Uh-uh.
Wow.
James Joyce.
Yeah, he's modernist.
Dubliners. I've read the Dubliners.
Okay. Done. We found one.
One.
There we go. That counts. That's not I've not read any. It's I've read limited. One.
I've read one poet and one short story collection.
I think that counts. That's grand.
Okay, well, now that we've discovered that, thank you for joining me here on my channel today, reading a book you hated, talking for 45 minutes about a book you hated where we don't understand each other's references. It's been a great experience.
I gotta review this now on my own channel. It'll be a very fettered approach, but nevertheless, we will get through the power of editing.
Yes. Okay. So for anyone watching, the next book for the Big Book Club, there's too many books. The next book for the Big Book Club that we're reading in July and August is The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. We're doing some non-fiction. And I'm reading that with Sunny from a Sunny Book Nook. So they're going to be on here at the end of August. So yeah, that's what we're doing next. Non-fiction.
Marvelous.
Thank you for joining me, Kieran. And thank you everyone for watching as well. Bye.
Bye. Dabaki.